After Ursula von der Leyen, Boris Johnson was also visiting Ukraine. At the meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, the British Prime Minister promised new arms deliveries and financial aid. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has pledged 120 armoured vehicles and anti-ship missile systems to Ukraine to repel the Russian attack. "We are increasing our military and economic support and bringing together a global alliance to end this tragedy," Johnson said after meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev on Saturday. "It must be ensured that Ukraine survives and prospers as a free and sovereign nation." The new arms shipments went beyond the former day's pledge to send £100 million worth of armaments, the UK government said. "The results won't be long in coming, but you can now say we're going to get even stronger," said Zelensky's chief of staff Andriy Marc, according to Ukrainska Pravda. Johnson announced that London would guarantee another $500 million World Bank loan to Ukraine. Johnson had traveled to Kiev unannounced for talks with Zelensky. The Ukrainian embassy in London tweeted a picture of the two heads of state sitting at a table with the words, "Surprise." A spokesman for Johnson said the Prime Minister was traveling as a show of solidarity with the Ukrainian people. Zelensky called Britain a leader in defense support to Ukraine. Johnson joins a number of European leaders who were currently traveling to Kiev to pledge their support to Ukraine. Austria's Chancellor Karl Nehammer also met with Zelensky on Saturday. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell traveled to Kiev on Friday. Before meeting Zelensky, they visited Bucha, where they inspected a mass grave together with Slovakian Prime Minister Eduard Heger. On Friday, Johnson received Chancellor Olaf Scholz in London for the first time since he took office. The two heads of government condemned the recent Russian attack on civilians in the eastern Ukraine city of Kramatorsk, which killed dozens, and they said it's a war crime. "The Russian president is responsible," said Scholz. He appealed to Kremlin chief Vladimir Putin to declare a ceasefire. "The war must stop, and it must stop now. Russia's crimes have not gone unnoticed," that's what Johnson said. Despite further promises about arms deliveries to Kiev, Scholz and Johnson initially remained vague about the specific wishes for heavy weapons such as tanks. Britain will send another £100 million worth of weapons to Ukraine, Johnson said, including the Starstreak surface-to-air missiles, and he said, "I would definitely agree that our two countries and our allies need to go further and provide more aid to Ukraine." As a sign of solidarity, EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen visited Ukraine in the middle of the war and got an idea of the atrocities committed by the Russian army. She was the first top Western politician to travel to the Kiev suburb of Bucha after allegations of Russian war crimes became known. "We saw the cruel face of Putin's army. We saw the ruthlessness and cold-heartedness with which they occupied the city," she said on Friday. At a meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev, she promised to speed up Ukraine's accession to the EU. "I am here with you in Kiev today to send a clear signal that the European Union is with you," she said. Shortly before their arrival in Kiev, rockets or missiles fell at a train station in eastern Ukraine, killing dozens of people trying to escape from a Russian advance. In addition to von der Leyen, US President Joe Biden and Chancellor Olaf Scholz also condemned the attack. Biden said it was another terrible atrocity committed by Russia. After the meeting with von der Leyen, Zelensky again called for tougher sanctions against Moscow. "Because Russia doesn't want to understand anyone or anything else," he said. He had previously called on the West to deliver weapons even more quickly. Scholz reacted cautiously to the demands that tanks from German stocks be handed over to Kiev. According to Governor Pavlo Kyrylenko, thousands of people were waiting at the train station in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk to be able to flee by train. And according to Ukrainian railway chief Alexander Kamyshin, 2 missiles hit. 50 people died, including 5 children, said the governor of the Donetsk region, Pavlo Kyrylenko, according to the portal Strana News. The attack on the city's train station also injured 98 people, including 16 children. Videos and photos showed lifeless people next to abandoned suitcases and bags and a stroller. The Ukrainian leadership had called on people in eastern Ukraine to get to safety because a Russian offensive is expected. Russia announced that it would concentrate attacks on the region. Zelensky blamed Russia for the attack. According to him, the projectiles were Tochka-U missiles. Pro-Russian separatists also spoke of a Tochka-U, but claimed that Ukrainian troops had fired them. Kramatorsk is in the Ukrainian-controlled part of the Donetsk region, claimed by the separatists. Von der Leyen had taken the train to Kiev. In Bucha, she looked at the exhumation of corpses from a mass grave. "It's the brutal reality that you see here," she said in the evening on German public television. She's impressed by the courage and determination of Ukraine to defend democracy. At the weekend, images of corpses, some of them tied up on the streets of the Kiev suburb of Bucha, triggered horror. Ukraine blames Russian troops for atrocities against hundreds of residents. Moscow denies this and speaks of staging and provocation without presenting any evidence. In reaction to the massacre of civilians in Bucha, the EU member states decided on further sanctions against Russia on Thursday. These include an import ban on coal from Russia, as well as new restrictions on trade and an extensive ban on Russian ships entering EU ports. In the meantime, EU countries have frozen assets of around 30 billion euros from sanctioned persons and institutions from Russia and Belarus. Zelensky welcomed the sanctions, but said they were not enough to stop Russia and end the war. More sanctions are needed, tougher sanctions are needed, he said in his daily video message. Zelensky spoke of further atrocities by Russian troops in Ukraine. In the small town of Borodyanka near Kiev, where cleanup work was underway, it was much more terrible than in Bucha. There are more victims there. In the heavily contested port city of Mariupol, almost every street is like what the world saw after the Russian troops withdrew from Bucha. Meanwhile, the new EU sanctions against Russia are in force now. The relevant legal acts were published in the official journey of the European Union on Friday. The EU states had previously approved a proposal by the EU Commission for a fifth packet of sanctions since the start of the Russian war against Ukraine. It provides for an import ban on coal, wood and vodka and numerous other punitive measures. A transitional period of 120 days applies to the coal embargo. The aim of our sanctions is to stop the ruthless, inhumane and aggressive behavior of the Russian troops and to make it clear to the decision makers in the Kremlin that their illegal aggression has a high price. That was said by EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell, and he is absolutely right. And unfortunately, this topic will be with us for quite some time. And I can't even imagine, in case of a ceasefire and a Russian withdrawal, what we would see in Mariupol and other cities. I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.